I'm paying him. Not possible. Why will I do that? If I am already reimbursed, the benefits and the incremental rewards of this entire AMP is staying in India, no question of the other side reimbursing. That's a simple message. Right? Great. So we move to, okay, there are some literature that I have put up. What is the international guidance saying about it? What is the OECDs of the world saying about it? Read it at your leisure. Okay, just one quick point and we have maybe 2 minutes to wrap up. Wherever you are looking, what is the way forward? How do you handle this AMP spend and this AMP adjustment? Look at the way you are disclosing your AMP in your financial statements. We just discussed that a few minutes back. Again, go back to your characterization and your FAR analysis and your TP policy. And think of an APA. If you are talking to your clients, talk to them with an APA. I'm sure there was a session on APA. So talk about an APA if possible. That is where you can get a certainty.
For drafting this agreement, any manual available? Drafting of agreements.
Nothing like a manual, but you have enough commercial literature available now. How can you draft it? So nothing like a manual, but a lot of commercial literature is available. See, because I always believe in heart of heart, TP, though it is codified under the Income Tax Act, it's not a tax law, to my mind. It is more like an economic law. So all the arguments which we try to take in TP are emanating from economics, not from tax. We are trying to blend economics with tax. So there is a lot of literature which is available. Issue of shares. This is again a hotly debated issue. You might have heard all the news, you might have seen all the clippings. Shell shocked, Vodafone, so many of them. And what is the issue? What is the real issue? Someone can help me, so I can relax on that. Everyone knows it.
It is shares issued at discount.
Okay.
Okay, X price, and if he wants to be adjusted at particular price, let's say the valuation may be 100 according to TP. If you issue a share at 70, if he wants to adjust it 30 rupees, okay, it will be in the hands of taxpayers.
Okay.
That is what issue of shares.
Anything else?
Well, the issue of shares it comes under the purview of transactions or etc. Could be anything, whether the Indian company is a share issuer, so one non-resident is selling it to another non-resident. So eventually, the transaction is taking place outside India, but it's a share of the Indian company. Whether that is also in the purview of transactions or not.
Okay. Okay.
Will have an impact in that particular year. It might have an impact on the profits later.
Possibly 10 rupee share is issued for 180 rupees, and when the shares are bought back, the profits are being distributed to the nations abroad. Is that the issue?
Okay. Interesting. I'll answer all the 4 parts. I have a slightly different view on this. The real issue in this share issue transaction is that what is happening is Indian subsidiary has issued shares to a foreign company. And while doing so, it has adopted a valuation method. Earlier there was CCI guidelines which used to say PECV, profit earning capitalization value method, and now it is DCF, discounted cash flow. So using one of the methods, shares were issued. Let's say they were issued at 50 rupees. The TPO came back and he said that the valuation which has been done is inherently flawed. Inherently flawed and it is wrong. And the value should have been, let's say, 150. So this 100, difference between 150 and 150 is being treated as an income which should have been received by the Indian company. The story doesn't stop here. they are also saying that since this income has not been received, it's an overdue receivable or a loan which the Indian company has given to the other side, so an interest should be computed on it. So there are two adjustments which are being made for 100 and interest on that 100. This is what the issue is. Now there are two things I would like to clarify before we go ahead. I think Kinjan will make that point. There is a difference between issue of shares and transfer of shares. What we are dealing in case of Shell and the Vodafones is issue of shares, not the transfer of shares. Transfer of shares from one non-resident to another non-resident is a taxable transaction because it has an underlying capital gains impact in India. So to determine the fair value of that impact, you need to have TP provisions and it fits within the definition of 92B. But issue of shares might not be. That is what we are going to discuss in next few minutes. Huge adjustments. In case of Vodafone and Shell itself, the adjustment has come to some 19,000 crores. Big numbers. And by the way, we should give a pat on our back for this. You know, Indians have always been innovative. We have many inventions in the past. We were the one to discover zero, etc. But we are the first one in the world who have made this adjustment. No one has ever made an adjustment on FDI. We are actually, when this news came up, the Shell CEO, she made a statement that you are actually taxing the FDI. It's like this, I'm putting money into your country and you are taxing me on that money. That is what you are doing. Pat on our back for this. So, as I said, this is the adjustment which has been made. What has happened? And I'll discuss the merits, but just want to quickly tell you the story of Vodafone. Because Vodafone is the most talked about, the most high-pitched litigation. What has happened is TPO passed an order, draft AO order was issued, and Vodafone preferred a writ to the High Court. It said that TPO has exceeded its jurisdiction because this transaction was never going to come in the purview of section 92B or 92 at all. But this has gone, he has exceeded, that's why I'm preferring a writ to quash this. So, the High Court here, heard the Vodafone out, and then it said that before I get into merit of this, there are 2 points which have to be considered. The point number 1 which has to be considered is that, in the first place, who has examined the jurisdiction, that whether this transaction is taxable or not, that has to be examined first. Because, if you go back and you have been having lectures on TP, TP is what? TP is a merely machinery provision. TP is a provision which says you have to compute the fair value having regard to arm's length price. But before that, it has to fall under one of the charging sections. Who has determined the charging section for this transaction? Who? No one. Neither the AO did that, neither the TPO did that. So there has to be someone who has to examine this first. So then High Court in its wisdom directed the DRP to have a look at this transaction and look at the jurisdiction of this transaction, whether it is taxable transaction or not, and if it is taxable, then the TP will apply. So on that note, this matter was set aside to the files of DRP for adjudication, and 60 days was given to the tribunal, and it was the verdict was that in case if the Vodafone is not satisfied with the DRP verdict, it can prefer an appeal directly to the High Court, notwithstanding the fact that it has a ITAT remedy available. So the matter is currently before the Bombay High Court. Again, it was slated for somewhere in the hearing, somewhere in the month of March. I don't recall exactly, 16th or 17th, but it has got adjourned. So this is where it stands as of now. I have 4 points to ponder in this.
Sorry, what is the point involved? What is the point? What is the issue involved?
Sorry?
What is the point involved?
The point is that, is this income taxable in the first place? Nobody has examined that when this Vodafone was happening. So neither the AO just said that, he gave a reference to the TPO without application of his mind. And TPO also did not say that how this income is taxable under which head of income. He never said that. And as we are saying, as we are saying, TP is merely a machinery provision. You have to know this first. Now there are 4 points which I would like to you to think about. Is that whether there is an income which is arising, because if you go to section 92(1), section 92(1) starts with the point that first of all there should be an income which should be arising, because section 92(1) says that any income arising from an international transaction shall be computed having regard to the arm's length price. So there has to be an income first. If there is no income, TP doesn't apply. Is there an income? Probably not. Whether then it is an international transaction, again answer is yes, no, we'll see. And can you split the transaction into 2? As I said, 100 and interest on 100. Is it possible under the current Income Tax Act? Probably no. And what is the right valuation approach? That's the last of concerns. So let's debate on each of these points, whether any income is arising. So when this initial TP order was passed for Vodafone, there was no discussion on this. Then under which head of income is it falling? But when the DRP order is passed, they have taken recourse to various sections. And they have said that section 14 of the Act, which talks about the heads of income. Section 14 says that all incomes which are chargeable to tax should fall under these heads of income, under these 4 heads of income. And it says save as otherwise provided under that. So they are saying, what department is saying is that this section 14 is a inclusive definition. It is not exhaustive. So it does not mean that if it is not falling within these 5 heads, it will not be taxable. I can still tax them. That's what the department is saying. Due respects to department, I would like to just read the section once again, the first line which has been written. Save as otherwise provided under the Act. I cannot recall even one section of the Act out of the various sections which are there, which actually empower or which says that issue of shares is a transaction which is chargeable to tax. At least I have not read it. Even section 14 starts with saying that save otherwise provided under the Act. So it has to be provided under the Act. You cannot deem a notional income and then bring it under TP, because TP is only a machinery provision which says what is the fair value of that number. First, that has to fall somewhere. Some section of the Act has to give me that power. Which is where it is the power is coming, I don't know. Because I have not read it. But this is what the contention of department is. And then department is saying, look at the definition of chapter 10. Chapter 10 says special provisions for avoidance of tax. So irrespective of the fact whether there is a falling under section 14 or not, these are special provisions. I can compute an income hereupon. I fail to understand. This is fundamental deviation from what has been written in the law and what has been acknowledged and accepted. But that is what they are saying. With due respects to department, I disagree. This is not the right view. Because it has been acknowledged, there are Supreme Court judgments on this point which have clearly laid out that any income has to fall within those 5 heads and then only it is chargeable to tax. This is the first point of argument that they have.
What about other sources?
But it is not falling within other sources. Other sources, if you go to section 56, 56 is defined. And there are 56, 7A and 7B. I'll talk about it in a minute. Even 56, 7A and 7B does not empower you to treat this issue of shares as a taxable income. At least that's what my reading is, and I'll put it across for your views. Wait for a minute. Even if you go to section 224, this is what again the second argument which they have been trying to take department is that they are saying that the section which defines income, the charging section, it says section 224 says income includes the following. So it's an inclusive definition. It is not exhaustive. So I have the power to include some more income, which is not even listed in the Act. That's what they say. Now, interesting point is, we all know that, this receipt of share, or this share money which is coming, it's a capital receipt, no denying on that. So they are saying that there are representations and arguments which have been taken that capital receipts cannot be taxed under the Act. So they went back to, section 224(6), and they said that, even capital gains is specifically taxable under the Act. So whenever there is a capital asset which has been transferred, that is taxable. So the Income Tax Act never preclude a capital asset from being taxed under the Act. So even though the share premium this is a sort of share premium that they have been using a word, even though it is a share premium, the share premium is still taxable because the Act gives a power to tax a capital receipt. That's what their argument has been. I agree with that. I agree that capital receipts are taxable. I'm not denying. But they are taxable if specifically provided under the Act. Look at the definition of section 224(6). Is it really giving you that power to tax the issue of shares? No. And there are specific exclusions under 47. Section 47 of the Act gives specific exclusions when a transfer of a capital asset is not treated as a transfer. There are exclusions on that. So either it has to be specifically excluded or included for it to be treated as a taxable or non taxable thing. You cannot deem something to be taxable. But that's what the department says. They have again placed a reliance on an interesting case law which I discussed last time, if you recall. It was a case law of Castleton. And Castleton ruling said that irrespective of whether it is chargeable to tax or not, you will have to still do TP compliances. They have relied upon this and they said that you have to compute our ALP irrespective of the fact that it is falling within the ambit of TP or not. Fundamentally wrong. Fundamentally wrong. These are arguments they are putting for the sake of putting arguments. It's like you want to say that this is not a lamp, but this is a this is not a lampshade, but this is a mic. And you can argue for endlessly that this is a mic, and you can say that because it looks like this, it has a shape like this. You can put all those nonsense arguments. These are the way they have been argued. Because none of these sections that I am talking about empowers you or gives you the right to tax this. Another interesting point which they have brought is saying that this issue of shares is not specifically exempted from capital gains. As I said, under section 47, there are specific exclusions. They are saying that if you go to section 47.485, for everybody's benefit, they talk about transfer of capital assets between a holding company and its subsidiary. And in either case, the recipient should be a Indian company. They are saying that the issue of shares is not specifically excluded out. And since it is not specifically excluded out over there, that's why it is chargeable to tax. Hold on. Valid point. But my fundamental point again is, if you say look at section 45, or go to section 224. 224 specifically says that a capital asset transferred, not issued, is chargeable to tax. If it is, so there has to be a specific inclusion first, and then there has to be exclusion. You cannot say that just because it is not excluded, it will be included. It's like putting the cart before the horse, and not a horse before the cart. Ridiculous. But that is what they are doing. Only one point which I think has a lot of merit, and I missed it, is section 247 says that if there is, what is transfer? Transfer is relinquishment or extinguishment of right. And what department is saying is that by not getting that 100, you are actually extinguishing your right to receive a fair value, and therefore it is a transfer. This probably is the strongest argument which the department has. Strongest argument. But my view in this is, what is a right? The right in issue of shares gets created only after you issue a share, not before that. Once you issue your share, then you have a right to get a fair value or not get a fair value. But not before that. So the extinguishment has not happened in this case. But this is a view which is probably a bit dicey. But otherwise, all their grounds, to my mind, are looking frivolous. They are just trying to make ground for the sake of making a ground, otherwise they don't have substance. That's what my view is. Even if you go to section 56(2), 7A and 7B, I don't think even these sections are giving the power, because these sections deal with the fact that when shares are transferred or shares are issued for more than so section 56(2), 7B is the most important one, which says if there is a transfer which is happening between two companies or shares are being transferred between or given by one company to another company for a consideration which is exceeding more than 50,000, then the excess will be treated as an income from other sources. But the key word over there is that consideration should be received from a person resident in India. So A has to receive from B, and that B has to be resident in India. In this case of Vodafone has received money from Vodafone Inc., which was not resident in India. So 56(7)B does not apply to them. So even over there, it does not fit. So I don't know where they are heading for, but these are the thoughts that they have. This was the point that I was talking about, section 247. Having said this, so before I move and we have some time, any thoughts on these arguments? Anyone would like to be on the department side, not on my side?
What if there is a rights issue or a bonus issue? How will they really look at it?
Same rate.
Same.
It has to be looked at same rate. There is a difference between a there is a difference between a buyback, and I think someone said a buyback. Buyback is different, where buyback is equivalent with your transfer of shares, because there is an existing share and then you are buying it back. It's a chargeable transaction, because the fair difference between the issue price and the transfer price has to be computed at arm's length. It's fair point. But issue or a rights issue stand on the same footing, which is what we are discussing.
But there will be a dilution of earning per share, because the shares are issued at a lesser price. The profits ultimately get distributed over a much more number of shares.
No, how?
In that case,
No, sorry, I did not get that question.
the profits of the company are ultimately distributed among the shareholders.
Yeah.
And if the shares are earlier issued at a much discounted price, then the profits will be distributed to those shareholders irrespective of the fact that they have paid less prices for the shares. I mean, the minorities stake they are at stake, their profits are at stake because of the dilution of it.
See, if you talk about a listed company, this issue of shares does not arise at all, because you are issuing at a market-driven prices. These issues are arising in case of unlisted companies. So most of the unlisted companies, either it's 100% holding or close to 100% holding that we have. That's point number one. Second, if you see, what is happening is, if you look at EPS, earning per share, that's a post income that you have done. And what are we talking about over here? We are here to determine the fair value of income. Okay, I take your point that there is a dilution of income. There is a dilution of income which has happened. But the dilution of income, is it a taxable transaction? What is the tax payable on that? What is the tax payable on that? Because you will pay tax on dividend which you are distributing. Dividend is X number. How many shareholders you are paying it to is irrelevant. You are paying it to 10 shareholders, that has no impact, because my dividend distribution tax is to be computed on the value that I am actually distributing. And the income, which is before EP, the earning that I have determined, if that is at fair value, what I have to do with that? It's a commercial call which company has taken. Tax is not to be paid. And the third reason which has also been argued by Vodafone and many more is that, look at it, I wanted to infuse 100 rupees into India, assuming it's a 100% holding. I wanted to infuse 100 rupees into India. My shareholding is already 100%. If you price my share at 100 rupees per share, I would have bought one share. If you would have issued, if you would have said that my share price was 10, I would have bought 10 shares. There is no motive for me to undervalue or overvalue my shares. Absolutely no logic. Why should I do that?
Except for stamp duty.
Yeah, stamp duty.
There is
Yeah.
one more question.
Yeah.
And in section 45, it says capital asset has to be transferred. Now in the entire chapter, when you are issuing the shares, there is no transfer of capital asset. So when there is a question of capital gain arises,
That's what I am saying.
because of
That is
the entire this, when you are reading section 45, it says capital assets have to be transferred in the previous year.
Yeah.
There is no capital assets. If there is no capital asset, how is the capital gain there?
And there is a fundamental difference, and go back to my discussion. There is a fundamental difference between issue of shares and transfer of shares.
Exactly.
Transfer of asset and issue of asset.
Yeah, so you say,
So these are, that's what I'm trying to reiterate myself, that these are frivolous argument, except that 247 relinquishment of right, there I said they have some ground, but other than that, all of them are weak
but
grounds.
to relinquishment of rights, I should have assets.
Then it's a bit dicey view. I'll tell you where the department is strong on that. What department is saying that the shares that you are issuing, there are inherent rights. So I as a company has these shares, and I had the power to issue these shares.
Okay.
So in this process, what would have happened is I had the right to receive the fair value, which is 150, but I received only 100 or 50. So in that process, I have relinquished that right of 100, and that 100 tantamounts to a transfer then, as per section 247, 1. Yeah. So this is where the disconnect is. This is where they have a slight.
But still is
I
strong.
could have issued lesser number of shares at a higher value and then issued bonus. How would it?
Because of the
That
rights.
is so.
So it's in,
See,
it doesn't.
I'm taking your point. The only place where I see, and we have been having a discussion with a lot of councils. Councils argue with all these views that we have been giving. Councils argue or agree with all the other points which we are making. Section 45, section 56, they are redundant, will not apply. Only section which they are also a bit concerned is section 247, which is that relinquishment of asset. It stands on a bit dicey wicket, bit dicey. So interesting to see how, yeah.
To extend this argument, you said to the extent of 100 rupees, you are trying to relinquish or extinguish the right to receive the money. You are relinquishing the right to receive the money,
Yeah.
but then that would tantamount to transfer.
Yeah.
But when you are relinquishing that money, whether that relinquishment of money is in respect of a capital asset,
So go back.
so second aspect of 45 is still missing, no?
No, see. Share, is it a capital asset?
Yeah, that is what the question is.
Yeah, so I'm answering the point. If you really look at share premium, okay, the fundamental argument which the company is starting with, it is saying that this is a capital receipt, not liable to tax. That's what we are starting with. So if it is a capital receipt, that means the underlying asset or the underlying share is a capital asset for the company. That is how they are deriving that logic. Okay, they are saying that since you have said that this is a capital receipt, since it's a capital receipt, the underlying asset, which we are discussing because of which this is arising, is also capital in nature, and since also capital in nature, the differential, the differential which you are relinquishing is tantamounting to capital transfer. That is what they are arguing. See, they have really worked very hard. They are trying to pull all the other sections. So they have pulled out section 224, so they have pulled out section 4, section 5, section 9, deemed to arise or accrue in India. Then they have gone to section 56. They have even gone to the extent of section 68. Section 68 talks about undisclosed income or undisclosed money. They have said that if you look at if there is an undisclosed income which is recorded in the books of or unrecorded share in premium which is recorded in the books, that will be taxed as an income in the hands of the recipient. Unless